Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to take a chance to talk to you because I get a lot of questions about schools as I'm selling real estate. And I know this is kind of the time of year, correct me if I'm wrong, where people start to think about school choices.
You're exactly correct. This is the time of year, and actually, it's appropriate. Right now, it's September 21. People are looking for the admission season for fall 2022. And the admission season essentially runs for most schools from September through December or January.
Okay, so probably the people listening to this are probably going to be looking at next year, would be my guess. So moving into that, like if someone was watching this well in advance, what are the things that they should be thinking about in order to prepare themselves to be ready for this? I mean, I worked with you and
Yes.
Betsy directly last year.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we enjoyed that.
And I have to say, it was probably, I mean, I feel like I deal with a lot of stressful things, and it was one of the more stressful things I've dealt with.
Well, I think that's always true when you're dealing with your children. It's, because obviously you're a parent, you want the very best for your children and you want to do the very best you can do for them. So that always adds another layer of stress. I think what parents need to do is if they want to start investigating schools, there are lots of private schools in San Francisco, as well as good public schools. So they should really look at both. For the private school, they need to start looking at schools that have the appropriate grade levels for their children. And they can investigate those schools by going on their websites and learning a little bit about the schools. All of the websites have a section about admissions, which explains the process to them, and they can begin to sort of dive in. Right now, schools have on their websites, parents can sign up for tours and or open houses. Now this year, because of COVID, most of the activities for parents are virtual, which is good and bad for parents because the good news is they often have many more of them because they're virtual. It's easier to schedule. So hopefully it'll be more convenient for parents in their schedule. Of course, it's not the same as being there in person, and we all understand those constraints, but it is, trying to keep their children safe, and we all appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why we ended up hiring you guys was because we were looking at this also in COVID, and we found it, I created a spreadsheet, of course, I'm a big spreadsheet person, but looking on the websites and stuff, we also found it very difficult to determine like what the personalities of the schools were, what are the pros and cons of the schools. So having an expert to kind of guide us through and talk to us about what are our values for our family. And did you guys feel like what schools did you guys feel lined up? That was really helpful because there's a lot to choose from.
There is, and that's essentially why we provide the service we provide. Is that was our whole goal, is to familiarize ourselves with the schools. And of course, Betsy and I have been, but combined, we've been in education over 70 years, but I've been in education here in the Bay Area since, for over 50 years. And I know the schools very, very well. We visit the schools on a regular basis and stay in contact with them. So we feel like we do know the ethos and personalities a little bit more about the schools, and hopefully we can match that to what parents are looking for. And that's pretty much what our service does. I mean, we try to individualize it. We listen to moms and dads about their children and what they're looking for their family, and then try and match them with schools that would work for them.
So after, let's pretend that we fast forwarded and we've narrowed this down to, 5 or 6 schools. What are some things that parents can be doing if they are looking at this, a year or 2 years in advance to either prep the child? Like, are there academic things or social service things, or what are the schools looking for that can help them set themselves apart? It sounds like, at least I felt like for a lot of the schools that we wanted to go to, it seemed like there were like 200 applicants and 6 slots. So how do you differentiate yourself from all those 200 people?
Well, the first thing we always advise you is if you're applying to a school that's a good match for your family, that helps narrow it down because they will also recognize that the family is a good match for their school, just philosophically and value-wise and ethics and all of that. We don't like, especially now, it depends on the age group, especially young children, preparation, we really sort of frown on that. Schools are really looking for developmental readiness for young children. Let's say if you're looking at kindergarten, they're really looking at developmental readiness. There are no skills per se that a child must have. We always reassure parents that if you're looking for a kindergarten placement, there isn't one school that we know of that really cares or bothers to even check whether a child is reading. Okay, so you want to take all that pressure off. They're children. They are still growing. Lots of things are coming. Bells and whistles are coming in at different times. So we don't worry too much about that. I think what you can do is make sure that your child is working up to their ability. So you want to make sure that you're giving them or providing them opportunities to develop in all different areas. And social emotional is a big part of it. It's not just academics. Our schools are looking for kids that are ready to be part of a classroom and be able to collaborate, that kind of thing. Now, for the older children, academics are important, but so are their extracurricular activities, their interests. Remember that no school that we know of is looking for cookie cutter kinds of students. They're looking for a variety of children from a variety of backgrounds that bring a different aptitudes and skills to the table. And that's what makes it so, it's a fun, actually admissions is a lot of fun because it's sort of like you're a painter and you're bringing all these different colors to bring into your classroom, all these different interests and all these different aptitudes to make an interesting palette,
So you worked in admissions before in a school, correct?
I didn't, Betsy did. I worked as a head of a school, and also I worked as the high school placement person for the school.
Okay. So what would be some big red flags that you guys would see that a parent could just like totally accidentally botch the interview process to get them checked off the list?
Okay. Well, for parents, entitlement, this idea coming in thinking, you're that they're entitled to admission at the school. So I think you have to be earnest about it. You have to take it seriously. You can't act like, we've had occasions where parents actually took phone calls during their interview to make a dinner reservation. That actually happened. So that doesn't speak well to how seriously the parents are taking the process. But also to be honest and about your child and be, we all look at children, they're not finished products, neither are we, but we're all growing. And yes, they've got areas of challenges and they've got areas of strengths, and to be honest and forthright about it. If you try and cover something up about your child, you don't want to tell them that they've got this issue or that issue, that's probably not the right way to start a relationship with a school. And plus, you want a school that's going to understand your child. And if your child has some special needs of some kind or special aptitude for something, you want the school to know about it and serve your child.
Okay. So it sounds like it's important for the schools to know that the parents are going to be involved. So both parents should plan to show up.
Exactly.
Maybe having your executive assistant book the meeting.
It's not a good idea. The other thing we always say is it's important that moms and dads get on the same page. A school wants a family that's happy with them. They want a family that knows what their philosophy is and is going to be able to support that. It's very, very important. So that's important that moms and dads talk about what kind of education they want for their children and agree upon that before they begin in the process. Because we've had many situations where it's clear dad is looking for one thing, mother's looking for something else. And as a school, we're not going to be able to satisfy both parents. Okay.
Right.
Now, one more thing I should tell you, to prepare your child, one of the things that you want to make sure as a parent is you've been respectful of school programs that you've been involved in before. So if your child is dropped off late to school on a regular basis, that doesn't bode well for the next school. They're going to say, these people don't take school very seriously. They never drop their child off on time. Another warning.
Okay, so making sure that you know, if you have been
Follow the
late,
rules.
maybe if you're a few years out, maybe start cleaning up your tardiness. And also we had to get recommendations from teachers, sometimes going back many years. So maybe making relationships with those teachers if you haven't already.
Yes, being a good supportive parent. I mean, that's really what we want. We want parents who are going to collaborate with us, you know, raising that whole idea of it takes a village. It's not far off. And I can tell you, I worked with middle school children for over 20 years. And anyone who's had a middle school age child knows sometimes there are a few bumps in the road. And what I can guarantee you is anytime the school and the parents were working together as a team, we were able to get any little bumps smoothed out. When we had problems is when we were on different.
So I remember when I was, you know, my kids are now 9 and 12, and, you know, so we were working with you on the middle school process. But I remember when I was first interviewing preschools, and I had a friend who we know as a mutual acquaintance was in admissions for a private school. And I was telling her about like my spreadsheet checklist for interviewing. And I was like asking about like the earthquake evacuation plan. So like, that was one of the things that you schooled us on. And I got schooled on early as well from my friend, was like, hey, you might not want to seem like the most type A parent at that moment.
Yeah. You know, that's true. I mean, and remember, the schools are looking at this point, it's sort of in a general sense. If you want to get into specifics about the school, there's plenty of time to do that later. But we need parents who are going to be able to be confident in our program and feel secure in the way we're doing things. And we always tell our parents or advise our parents, look at the students at the school, especially the older students at the school. If you're looking at K through 8, look at the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Observe the way they behave, observe how they're, what's happening in class, the kinds of assignments they're getting, the way they're relating to one another, the way they relate to their teachers. And if you like what you see, it's probably going to be a good match for you. So you can put your kindergartner in with lots of confidence that when they graduate in 8th grade, they're going to be something you're going to be particularly happy that you chose that school. Okay.
Right.
And we work hard.
The schools probably don't want to take on a parent that looks like they're going to be micromanaging them, and like, you know, it's similar when you go to buy a house and like you start asking about like, you know, the buyers are like, oh, tell me about all the structural integrity, and like they're digging it, you know, and asking the listing agent.
They're not going to be happy.
The listing agent's like, oh, I think this person's really nervous, right? So it's like understanding when that time is. And I really didn't understand that. I don't think a lot of parents do.
And remember too, you know, these schools do a really good job, and they do like parent input. I mean, most of the schools welcome parent input, but it has to be at the right time in the right place.
That's a really, really good tip. And then what about like during the interview process, again, like back to, is it like 200 to 6? I mean, what kind of odds are we looking at?
It depends on the school. Okay. And just because, and some schools are have more applicants for openings than others. And that isn't necessarily indicative of the quality of the school. It's just some schools maybe are located in a place that's more convenient for people, so they get a lot more applicants than others. It can be a mixture of reasons for that. But it depends on the year and the school. But it can be, honestly, it can be as high as like 7 applicants for every opening here in San Francisco. So it can be a very competitive environment. But that shouldn't scare people off. Right. Because what we always tell our clients is someone's going to get those spaces. And if you don't apply, it won't be you. Right. So, and some schools are not as competitive. Some schools only have maybe 1 or 2 applicants per opening. It just depends. It also depends on the year. Now there are entry year points, typically kindergarten is an entry point. Typically, sometimes around 5th, 6th grade, a middle school is entry point, and then of course 9th grade is entry point for the high schools. So
Right.
in
One
those
thing-
cases, those are built-in entries. Otherwise, to get a space in a private school, you're going to be depending on attrition.
Mhm. One thing, we weren't in a position financially to put our kids in school in kindergarten in a private school. We just weren't there in our lives at that time. But one thing that I did realize, and I think that a lot of parents, probably are like me too, where even if they have the money, sometimes they're like, how much does K-5 really matter? Like maybe they could go to public school for that time. But in the process of interviewing, I realized like there was one school that we were very interested in, San Francisco school, and it was very, very competitive to get in there. And I thought, oh, well, if we had the money back in kindergarten, that would have been the better time to get in there because they have all the slots. And it seems like, those kids were just carrying on through 8th grade, right? So then whenever it came to 6th,
but we don't like to put a lot of pressure on parents that way and feel this guilt. Oh my gosh, if I can't afford to put them in private school and kindergarten, that's it. The poor kids, their path to higher education has been destroyed. Not at all. So there are lots of, we always tell everyone, there are lots of paths to get to the same endpoint, and not any one path is the absolute input. Necessary, absolutely necessary for any given family. So it depends on your circumstances. And if in fact public school is what you're opting for K-5 perhaps, everyone should be confident there are schools that have openings, built-in openings for middle school, for typically 6th grade. Some even have some in 5th, but most of them, they open up some spots in 6th grade. So if you decide you want to switch at that point and go into a private school at that point, the same is true for high school. So the high schools take students from both private and public. There isn't a prejudice involved in that. So there are always ways, different paths, like I said, different options for parents, and they shouldn't feel guilty.
And I think we all believe like public school is a great thing. Like I went to public school.
Me too.
I really wanted my kids to go to public school. We moved them primarily during COVID for those reasons. But so in the event that you actually prefer public school, but only want a specific one because it's a lottery in San Francisco, how do you juggle that? Like, how does that work?
It's honestly a lottery. Now, the thing about the public schools is any parent can go to the website, and the website for the San Francisco Unified School District is very, very informative. So it tells you all the steps, everything's there. You can, the schools are listed there. They, before COVID, they actually had days you could go visit, but they have other ways of getting information on them. And you go ahead and list them. You can list every single school in San Francisco. You can put the 70 whatever grade schools on your list, but you put them in order of your preference and hope for the best. They do give weight to the neighborhood schools. So if you would really like to attend the school that you are assigned to in your neighborhood, there is weight given to that, but that's not a guarantee. But certainly parents should pursue that. They should look into it. We always encourage our parents to look at the public schools, and also if they want, go ahead and look at the private and parochial schools. The good news for parents in San Francisco is the announcement of what public school you've been assigned to for round one, the first round, is announced at about the same time that the private school admissions acceptances are announced. So at that point, it's usually mid-March, parents will have that information. They'll have the knowledge, this is where my child would go to public school if I choose to pursue that. And then you also know whether you've been accepted to which private schools you've been accepted to. So you can make a very informed decision at that point. So that's the good news. That is good for parents.
Although, I just can't even imagine adding on the public options to that. Like, it was just like, for us,
it's hard, and I tell parents, it's just take a deep breath and know it's going to be 2 or 3 stressful months. If there's just no way around it, we have been told by many, many people, and Ruth, you would probably say the same thing, that they spent more energy on looking at schools and writing out applications for their grade school child than they did for college and or graduate school. So
Yes.
just sort of be prepared. It's arduous.
It definitely is. And I can, with the two, it really adds to the complexity.
It does.
It's mind-boggling.
Well, you did 2 at the same time. Now, the good news is if parents want to start with their older sibling and then a couple years later, the younger sibling, the schools do have strong sibling policies. So that is good news for parents with more than one child. That it's not automatic, but there is a strong policy toward accepting.
So with the public schools, and I haven't been through the public school process in San Francisco because I live in Pacifica. But with the public schools in San Francisco, there's no applications. It's really the job is just like touring the schools, figuring out which are your choices, and then listing those choices. Correct?
Well, a little bit. Yes, you're right. The application does require you've got to register. It requires some paperwork, that kind of thing. It's all explained on the website. There are a few schools that you sort of apply to separately. But they don't have essays and application fees and that kind of thing. But it does take a little bit of paperwork on your part. That's pretty much what it is. It's not just getting your applications in for each of the different schools.
Got it. And then so if you have your sites, let's say you have your site set up on a school, you really, really want to get in there. At this point, you're like in the process. What are the things, you don't want to be entitled, but like, what are the strings that you can pull, if any, in either the public or the private space to help increase your odds of getting in?
Yeah, I don't think I don't know of any strings for the public schools because it's actually done on a computer program and it's all laid out like that for you. So good luck.
Okay.
And private schools, interesting enough, and one of the things that's always made me feel good about being in this whole business is, for the most part, and Betsy and I have done literally thousands of students, we feel that the integrity of the process is intact. The decisions are made on the student's file, not who their parents were, who their parents knew, or anything like that. Of course, reality wise, if you're maybe a world known figure of some sort and highly respected and your child is applying, let's face it, they're probably going to give them a couple of extra looks. But we can verify for you that there have been children whose parents did fall into that category who were not taken at schools because the school did not feel they could serve their child. In fact, at one of the schools, I remember one time that the school did invite the child back for a second time to take one more look, to give them a little extra, and then said, what, this isn't going to be a good placement. It's not a good match. And they went ahead and
what about like letters of recommendation? Do those factor in?
It's interesting. Many of the schools will say on their website during admissions that letters of recommendation are not necessary, nor are they really welcome. I don't, we used to take letters of recommendation at my former school, and we gave that up about 20 years ago because we realized every letter of recommendation we got was pretty much the same thing. They were friends of the family. They said the family was great. You didn't learn anything from it. So we sort of felt like these are useless and it's just more paperwork. The recommendations that typically schools require are from the student's teacher. And it's typically their current teacher for whatever year they're applying. Sometimes, as you mentioned, especially with COVID, they've asked for maybe 2 years of the last year's teacher and the current teacher. And so those are important. Those teacher recommendations are very helpful for them. Parents will not see those recommendations. Those are confidential. parents should want that to be, because you want a teacher to be able to be absolutely sort of honest and forthright about the student's strengths and possibly any challenges they might have.
Mm-hmm. What about etiquette? Is there, like when you have an interview for a job, there's certain etiquette, following up with a thank you note, things like that. What are schools looking for? Like what's common?
Well, our recommendation is not to inundate the schools with thank you notes. We've had stories from admission directors where parents have gone so far as to, thank the person that opened up the front door for them in the school. A little overboard. I think it doesn't hurt to, after an interview, after a one-on-one meeting, to write a thank you note saying how much you enjoyed speaking with them and how much you appreciate the time and energy they spent getting to know your family. That would be fine. But again, don't inundate them with 20, 30 thank you notes. What happens is, when you're reading the file, there's an admission committee. I mean, if there's too much in there, people
So no
don't
gift basket.
Yeah, we always tell the story. Stanford used to have the saying, "The thicker the file, the thicker the kid." So don't give, and that's a good advice for parents. Don't give schools more information than what they've asked for. If they wanted that information, they would have asked for it. So don't, we had one time, I had a family send an art portfolio for kindergartner. I mean, maybe 30 pages of artwork from the kid. It did not work. Yeah. It did the anti, it was like, really? Seriously? Why are these parents so concerned? They think they have to give us all this information. What is it about their child that they think we can't see? Right. So we would say, do not give them more information than what they asked for.
And what's the deal with all the first choice thing and that kind of language? Can you talk about that a little bit?
For the most part, it doesn't make any difference. Again, a lot of parents think that's necessary. It used to be, if you go back 20 years, and sometimes you'll get advice from people who had children in schools 15, 20 years ago, you have to write them, you have to say, do this. I don't think it makes that much difference. So it's, again, cases vary, and we get into nuances and subtleties with our clients about that. But I think for the most part, just let the process play out. And if that indeed works out, sometimes what we found is a lot of parents who will write the first choice do not get as many acceptances as people who don't. Because what might happen is an admission director knows that parent A has said this is the first choice. So they might go ahead and send an acceptance to parent B, thinking maybe we've got a shot at getting parent B because we've always got parent A. We'll put them on the wait list.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
And so in some ways, sometimes it can also work against you. It's not always a sure deal, because then they sort of keep you in the back pocket because they know you're coming. And if they need to go to you from the wait list, then you'll be there.
Interesting. Okay. Last question. I don't want you to have to give away everything.
Okay.
If you are put on the wait list, like, is that a nice way of them just saying, like, we actually hate you? Or are you really on the wait list, and does it vary by school?
It varies by school. There are some schools that keep a very, very small wait list. Okay. Other schools, the wait list is much larger. But quite honestly, I think the wait lists are true in many ways. I mean, they can be big wait lists. So, I mean, you might be, there might be 70 people on the wait list. But to tell you the truth, a lot of times those are all kids and families the school would have liked to take. It isn't like they just did it just to make you feel good or anything. It's unfortunate, but our time, what used to happen is we make piles, accept piles, wait list piles, no piles. And then what happens is when it comes down to make final decisions, that accept pile is 3 or 4 times bigger than you've got space. And
Mhm.
then it becomes a really, there are tears shed sometimes in admission decisions. Oh, you can't believe we're not going to be able to take that family. Oh my God, I love that family. So, and that happens. And so that group was all originally accept. Now they're waitlist, but they weren't accept. We would have loved to have had them as just space. And again, they have to then make decisions based on so many things. They take into consideration zip codes and cultural diversity and ethnic diversity and socioeconomic diversity. And then they're looking for all different kinds of kids. They take some extroverts and some introverts and some little engineers and some artists and
Mhm.
works.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. So no, I said it was the last question. This is
Okay.
really the last question. So no advice, is there advice on getting yourself up off the wait list in the event that you're on the wait list?
I think at that point, if you want to, you obviously contact the admission people and let them know that you really, really, really would still like to go to that school. At that point, you might look for some families that you know at the school, if possible, to put in a good word for you.
Mhm.
And just to let them know, look, we're here. And if you were to give me a call, I will be down there immediately with an acceptance,
Mhm.
and just hope for the best. I mean, they try, the schools really try and work with you as parents, but it is hard. And sometimes there's just no room on the wait.
Mhm.
What happens is they send out acceptance letters and they get a higher yield than they had, and they don't go to wait list. There are years that many of the schools never touch their wait list.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's the way it is.
Awesome. Well, this has been so helpful. So for those
Okay.
of you out there listening, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. And,
Yes.
having, if you're a very busy professional, then having someone that you can brainstorm with, like Paula and Betsy, where, it's like, what schools do I choose? Like, just to save yourself some time and I think it's such an emotional process. So having a professional that you can trust, that's like to gut check you and also give you some tips on interviewing and your child interviewing and different things like that, I think it just makes the stressful process a little less stressful to help you feel security in how you're proceeding forward. So I'll add the information to the text thread, and so that you guys can contact Paula if you want to chat further.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. I really appreciate it. And we so enjoyed working with you and your family last year and your darling little boy. So
Likewise. Well, thank you for your help. We had a
okay.
successful situation outcome.
Yeah,
So
it's
thank
been
you
a
so
busy,
much.
it's been a busy fall so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Talk to
right.
you soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.